अमीर जी एक सोलो पिक्चर मेरे भाई को पिछाना मेरे बाप की पिछाना अमीर सर लास्ट वन अमीर सर लास्ट वन
अरे मैम आप लोग आइए ना।
सर
जिसका हुआ जगह दो फटक से रुको सर जगह दो ना यार क्या कर रहे हैं रुको प्लीज सर सामने सर यहाँ पे
हाँ ले लो या सामने आओ मैम
लोग आपका चलेगा मैम इधर देख लीजिए वो उसके अंदर बाहर नहीं दिखे
मैम सेंटर
मैम या
तो अंदर कैसे जाएंगे वन से या मैम एक्सक्यूज मी आपको लेना सर आप थोड़ा कम का भाई मिनिमम यहाँ पे दिखे मैम जी थोड़ा कम एक मिनट मिनी
all the wonderful people who are here, I would like to say that in order for publishers to carry on, I think I'm going to start with Akshay because he's been working so hard on this book. And I want to know, I mean, what was the situation? You just woke up one morning and said, Nasir Hussain? How did it work?
Yeah, you know, first of all, I'd like to thank Mami for giving me, my publishers, this platform to launch this book. It's we feel very honored. I feel very honored. This company that I am in. I must tell you that Jo Jeeta Wahi Sikandar is one of my all-time top 5 films. And to be on the dais with Mansoor and Aamir is like, to quote my friend, because dreams do come true. So, but you know, this is like slightly planted question because Nasreen already knows the answer to this question.
That's true, but
Uh,
we're supposed to be professional.
yes, yes. See, actually, I was always familiar with Nasir Saab's films in the sense that, you know, I grew up watching Hum Kisi Se Kam Nahi and Yadon Ki Baaraat on loop. And then, you know, Jo Jeeta Wahi Sikandar is one of those films which I saw when I was probably 12, 13 years old. And I was familiar with Nasir Saab's work. But I wasn't certain whether I want to do a book on him. I was actually sifting through ideas when, after I had finished my first book, which was a biography of Sahil Ludhianvi's. And I remember speaking to 3 or 4 people, of which one was Kausar, one was you. And I said that, you know, I have these 3 or 4 ideas and, you know, what makes sense. And I do remember that both of you all said, Nasir Saab, of course. And then when I started, you know, researching, reading and all, I realized that here was a man who written dialogues for some great films of the 50s. Munimji, Paying Guest. Before that, he was credited for story for a very big hit, Anarkali. And then he has this, like, you know, 2 decades in Hindi cinema between 57 to 77, where every film of his is a spectacular commercial hit. Dil De Ke Dekho, Fir Wahi Dil Laya Hoon. And I said, you know, this man, his legacy needs to be celebrated. And that's what, you know, eventually got me started.
Now, the average age here is about 30, and I would like to know, really, Akshay, how relevant is his work today?
Well, this is a bit of a difficult question because there are tropes and themes which are there in Nasir Hussain's cinema right through. You know, the couples, the romantic couples setting out on a journey. Now you see that even in I think Aditya Chopra acknowledged this in his book to you, that, you know, Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge is basically an amalgamation of 3.
You know, never ever thought about that. I don't know. While I was watching the film today, I was pointing out to my nephew sitting here every scene which I remember being there on set. I didn't know what was going on. I knew something was going on. The Aja Aja set and, you know, Oh Hasina, Sona Re Sona. I seem to remember more of the songs. I don't think I knew what my father was doing. I knew it was his work. No, I didn't understand fame.
And even I never, it's never occurred to me that Shashank was famous or something. Because I think he was such a normal person, you know, that he didn't have any airs about him or that entire star or, you know, thing. And he was one of the most successful filmmakers of his time. But he was very normal and casual, so I don't think he, you know, really exuded that kind of air. And so none of us, it never occurred to me that, you know.
Mansoor, what about you?
Well, you'll be surprised. I saw Teesri Mandir maybe 15 years after it released. So I was totally disconnected with what was happening. So forget whether my father was famous or not. But yes, I mean, I did feel we were privileged. You know, I knew that he's someone special. You know, I didn't know about fame as such, but yeah, we felt privileged and, you know, stuff like that. But I think to extend what Aamir is saying is that he was not a filmy personality, or rather he didn't have big bashes. He didn't have a lot of hanger-ons. He didn't have, you know, the sort of, he would have one party in a year, that was his birthday, when everybody was there, and I'd go around with my autograph book and try and get everybody's autograph. But yeah, that night felt very special. That night I could feel that he was very, very famous, yeah.
I was just wondering then, what were the kind of conversations you had at meal times with him?
It was not films, that's for sure. My dad, he used to go in the morning to the office, and he used to come back for lunch, and then he would go back again, and he would come back by, I think, 6 or 7?
6:30.
6:30. It wasn't even dark yet, and he would be back home every single day. I don't think that happens anymore.
I don't think that ever happened. For example, my life, I mean, very rarely do I come home by 6:30.
You've mentioned that in the foreword, that he had a beautiful work-life balance.
Yeah, so it was amazing to see the balance that Shashank had with his, you know what Nuzuz is saying, he loved his work, but he was, you know, as much with the family, and somehow he used to manage to come home every day at 6:30. I don't know how.
And that was it. Then he was with us. But what he did do, after he had come home and showered and got dressed in his white crisp kurta pajama, which was his home wear, and I think at an appropriate time, mix himself a drink and put the music on. So every evening was full of music, every single day.
And what was he listening to?
I'll let you answer that.
My dad was always wanted to be on the cutting edge of music sound coming. He wanted to, in fact, when I reflect, one of my favorite bands was Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which is not a band that most people listen to. And my dad had bought that cassette, and so he introduced me to it actually. Pink Floyd, he had brought on his London trip, and there were many such albums which actually I got exposed to because he had bought it. So yeah, he wanted to, and he had this Zenith radio, and on that he would tune in onto world music, and that was a big part of the evening. So music was a very big part of his inspiration. And
He also had a turntable in his car, which so he had a turntable in his car. Like now earlier we used to have cassette players, and then now we have whatever CD players, and now we have just Bluetooth or whatever. But at that time, turntables like records, to have a record player in a car which bumps around and all that is very rare. So he used to have a turntable in his car.
Fantastic, because I mean, how did he keep it steady? There was some good technical stuff.
There was some heavy duty, what is it called? Suspension that was done, yeah. Sometimes the songs used to bounce.
He used to kind of hop a little bit.
And you mean he didn't listen to filmy music, Hindi film songs?
No.
Yeah,
It was always Western music.
It was always
Interesting.
I just want to add over here that, this was a question I asked all three of them when I was researching for the book, that what was the music that he was listening to, and they said this, that it was essentially Western, and Nusrat said, Top of the Pops, and
Beatles,
Elvis Presley. But Aamir also made one very good point over there. He said, yes, Western music is fine, but Chachajan had a knack for a popular tune. He knew ye gana hit hone wala hai. So it's not just Western music, but he had that flair for a popular song.
I can add, because my interest in what Daddy was doing was mainly the music. I used to enjoy, and the story sittings, not the shooting so much. So the music sessions were very, very fun to watch, and I had become used to the idea that I know which tune my dad's going to like. And like when I used to watch him with Pancham Uncle, and Pancham Uncle used to sweat before my dad came over because he was a tough customer to please. And I remember that, and he had a little dibia with pan in it. So he said it, and after the tune, he would do this. If he did that, the tune was rejected. Ugly. So I knew it's gone. So these are little idiosyncrasies which I imbibed. And only later, when I never thought I'd make films, but only much later did I realize how much of an intuitive tune sense he had, And it was not because he played the piano or the guitar or knew notation. It was just an inbuilt judgment of what is a good tune.
You are obviously a film family now, and 3 generations. Can you tell me, I believe your father, I have to give a little aside here, I think it was some years ago, I actually won't know exactly the year, but it was Aamir who said to me, absolutely you have to go and interview my uncle. And he took me to the house, and Nasir Saab was a little reluctant. I think Mansoor vanished very quickly.
Are you okay?
I think it's a little bit of a rocky chair. Anyway, I think you should. I think it's okay. So basically, Nasir Saab said to me, he was very reluctant to speak. To be honest, he was very reluctant to speak. But then Mansoor left. I don't know if Nusrat was there that day.
No, I wasn't there. Aamir was there.
Nusrat was not there.
In fact, before you came in, I
Yes.
had tried very hard to do this, to interview him. You know, I kind of followed him around with a, a dictaphone for a couple of days. He refused.
Yes.
It's 2001.
Yeah.
So
So
that
no,
was
I was very
you were
keen
there.
because
Yeah.
see, he had told me so many stories about his life, So I felt that that should be recorded somewhere, by someone. For example, I was an assistant with him for 4 years, so I spent a lot of time with him at that time. So when we would drive from Carter Road, then he would point out the house that he used to live in as a paying guest when he first came to Bombay. And he would tell me that, I had no money. So I used to eat boiled eggs because that is the cheapest thing. So he would buy 2 boiled eggs and just boil them and eat them. So for the first, the first few months that he was here, when he came, he didn't know anyone. He was, the family was also quite upset with him that he was planning to join films. So the few family members who were in Bombay were not very happy with the fact that Nasir Saab was wanting to be in the films. And I remember him telling me that the family was so upset that they actually told Maulana Saab, Maulana Azad, who's my great grand uncle, and Nasir Saab was made to go and meet him so that Maulana Saab could put some sense into him. कि भाई इसको समझाओ ये फिल्मों में जाना चाह रहा है. And in the entire family it was Maulana Saab, Maulana Azad, who said to Jajaran ke just don't listen to anyone. You do what you feel like doing. So I had heard so many stories from him. In fact, we were talking about Teesri Manzil. Teesri Manzil there's some amazing, unbelievable stories about Teesri Manzil. I should share this one. Teesri Manzil actually, originally Goldie Uncle was not directing. And Shami Uncle was not in the film originally. It was Dev Saab who was playing the lead, and Nasir Saab was directing it. He had the story, screenplay, dialogue written by Nasir Saab, and he was going to direct it. And Goldie Uncle was directing a film called Bharon Ke Sapne for NH Films. Bharon Ke Sapne was a script that Nasir Saab had written during his college days and about the educated unemployed. It's a very offbeat kind of a film. And Goldie Uncle was making Bharon Ke Sapne with Rajesh Khanna and Asha ji. And Teesri Manzil was, Dev Saab and Asha aunty. And Nasir Saab was directing that, Goldie Uncle was directing this. So apparently one day Dev Saab, I think, said something. And it was at Bhalla Bungalow, if you know where Bhalla Bungalow is on Pali Hill, which now there's a Sandhu building coming up over there. There used to be Bhalla's bungalow over there, and there was a huge film party where Sadhna ji was getting engaged to Nair Saab. So the entire industry was there and all that. And that night at the engagement party, Nasir Saab and Dev Saab came to blows. They were a little high also. And so they came to blows actually. Because apparently Nasir Saab overheard him saying that नासिर जो है वो मेरे साथ बड़ी फिल्म बना रहा है, कलर फिल्म है, और गोल्डी को उसने कोई ब्लैक एंड वाइट फिल्म दे दी है, कोई नया लड़का है राजेश करके उसके साथ बना रहा है. तो नासिर वर वेरी अपसेट एंड उनका कुछ लफड़ा हो गया. अच्छा, आई हैव चेक दिस विद साधना जी आल्सो. I asked her, I said, did it happen? She said, yeah. So they had to be pulled apart and all. And I can never imagine Nasir Saab trying to hit someone. And for that matter, I can't imagine Dev Saab also trying to hit someone. They're both such gentle souls and so sophisticated. But khair, hota hai. So the next day, apparently, Nasir Saab called Goldie Uncle to the office and said, your brother is saying this. So now you're going to direct Teesri Manzil and I'm going to direct Bharon Ke Sapne. But Dev is not in Teesri Manzil. And then he called up Shami Uncle. And I had checked this with Shami Uncle also. He called up Shami Uncle. And because before that, they had had a bit of an altercation of Shami Uncle and Nasir. And that's how they got back together, Shami Uncle and Nasir Saab. And that's how this film was finally made, with Shami Uncle in it instead of Dev Saab, who was originally there. And Goldie Uncle directing it, and Nasir Saab directing Bharon Ke Sapne. So he had told me so many stories, and I thought it's very interesting to know, ये film हम देखते हैं उसके पीछे क्या हुआ था, क्या क्या हुआ था उसके पीछे. So I was very keen that it should be recorded somewhere,
And that was something invaluable that happened, because had you not goaded Nasreen to do this, my first reference point for my research was that interview, which you urged her to do it, and then they were kind enough to pass on that audio file to me. and there are such nuggets about his early life, his early years, and the fact there's this one joke which is there. This is how actually the book also begins. That someone asked him, this was in class 10 matriculation examination. He says ki some intelligent soul in the class who was apparently also named Mansoor asked the headmaster ki headmaster ji ye kitne log pass ho jayenge. So the headmaster looked around the class.
Everyone felt कि यार film में जो है वो it's not a good place to be. So most families at that time would react. I mean, even at my time, they were my own family. Nasir Saab and Abbajan were telling me, "Chacha, na कि नहीं filmों में मत आओ." They both filmmakers are telling me not to be in films.
That's how.
But I think for actually in my case the reason was different. In my case the reason was that Chachajan and Abbajan both knew, even Chachijan and Ammi, they all felt that it's such a volatile profession. One minute you're up there, the next minute you're not. You know, you have no certainty, no security. You know, so they wanted us to be more stable in life. You know, go into a profession which is more stable: engineer, doctor, chartered accountant. In any case, I would never have managed to do any of those three things. but उनके मन में ये बात थी कि कोई अच्छा professional management कर लो, ये कर लो. You know, don't get into film because they didn't want us, I think, to go through the uncertainties and the trauma of the volatile business that we are in. So they were trying to be protective actually. But in his case, I think when he was coming here, it was more कि नाक कटा, हाँ shame था, नाक कट जाएगी यार फिल्मों में. हाँ.
It wasn't an honorable profession.
Yes, but now it's become a little too honorable, I think. I would also ask you that.
Not in my experience. The only thing new I learnt about him because I had spent all my life with him, and the first time I started working with him, I found he's as relaxed. He had a fantastic sense of humor. Shashank had a fantastic sense. So always cracking jokes, seeing the humor in everything, and on set, the atmosphere used to be very relaxed. There used to be no stress and tension. कि लोग चिल्ला रहे हैं, ये हो रहा है, वो हो रहा है. You know, it used to be a very relaxed atmosphere. The only thing I noticed which was different, which I felt for the first time, is that he's got amazing leadership qualities. So when he's on set, he's like a tiger here. He's got amazing, leadership qualities. People love him, and they love to follow him, and they trust him. So his entire team was very trusting of him, and he was a great leader. I think other than that, it was very similar for me, whether he's at work or at home. Yeah.
Was he very decisive?
Yes, he was very decisive, and he was very clear what he wanted. And when I say leadership qualities, it's not just being decisive; it's also being able to command. And you don't have to shout to command, but being able to lead the entire team, because filmmaking is all about that. And he was a naturally good leader, actually.
And Mansoor, do you think in his work, did he ever see his work as making compromises?
No, not at all. In fact, that extends with what Aamir was saying about being decisive. For Karwa, they actually very rarely did my dad put his finger on a wrong tune, and they actually recorded and shot a full song for Karwa, and I could see that throughout he was not happy. I remember this vaguely, and he came back after it was shot and everybody saw it, and he says, "I'm throwing this out." So he's very decisive, and so he wouldn't compromise, and they shot the whole song, and that is Charti Javani. That is the final song. That is the situation, sorry. So he went back to Panchamangal, and now Panchamangal had to outdo that. So it was something in the tune, but he didn't want to tell him that. But the tune didn't, so he didn't compromise at all. He reshot the whole thing, a new song.
And Akshay, when you started working on his films, do you
Let me
see...
give you one more example of his uncompromising nature. There was a film being made called Zabardast, which eventually got made later on. But when it was first announced, it was not Mushir Riaz who was producing it. It was Nasir Saab who was producing it. And the cast was Dilip Kumar, Dharmendra, Rishi Uncle, and Raj Kiran. And there was Asha Aunty, there was an actress from the south, I think Sharda.
Yes, you mentioned Sharda.
And then there was Zeenat Aman, there was Neetu Ji. So it was like a star-studded, film. And this was immediately after he had made यादों की बारात, हम किसी से कम नहीं, and now it was Zabardast. It was huge. I mean, that announcement was like there's an earthquake coming, you know, like that. It was big. And Yusuf Saab was, you know, Dilip Kumar was acting after some time. He shot 4 reels of that film, and he was not happy about something, so he shelved the film. Now that was a big step for him to do, which is just another example of him not being, you know, not wanting to compromise. So when he was not happy, he decided not to make the film.
But also one must say that people who produce their own films have this luxury.
Well, you know, it's not that. It's an attitude. You see, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have. What matters is your attitude. And I think in his attitude, he was very clear that he didn't want to compromise on anything.
Can I
yes,
just
of course.
taking off from something from what Mansoor said about, I mean, he mentioned Karwa and then Aamir mentioned Zabardast, which the announcement is made. I think you also gave me a figure 1.25 CR at that time minimum guarantee, which was like huge. Now, this film is announced after Hum Kisi Se Kam Nahi, which is a 77 release. It's a big blockbuster hit, Hum Kisi Se Kam Nahi. And see, this is the thing again that, you know, we have taken a certain one-dimensional account of decades. So 50s, we look at Nehruvian socialism and nation-building narratives, and we celebrate the cinema of Mehboob Khan and V. Shantaram and Guru Dutt. And that entire Filmistan school from which Nasir Hussain emerges and Subodh Mukherjee emerges, and, you know, the people who own the cinema of the 60s.
Now, what I understood is you were not very keen on just following your father's footsteps. But when you decided to, what was the best advice he gave you?
It was not that I was not too keen. I wasn't interested in films at all. And when you mentioned that I assisted and then Aamir assisted, I was a useless assistant. I should have been sacked on day one. Aamir was a brilliant assistant. And I was like, I think यही कहानी जोजीता में भी है, one good son and one bad. So that's where it comes from. So Aamir is the good son and the bad son. But really, but that's the thing. Actually, my dad didn't give me any advice. But somehow I felt that, see, for me, I was a dropout, and I had done many wasteful things. So for me, it was to redeem myself in his eyes. It was more about that, and so I was quietly working on a video film just to test myself, because I had video equipment. In those days, nobody had it. You could actually edit it. And I shot a 1 hour 40-minute film which I had written, which was supposed to be a 20-minute film. It became a 1 hour 40-minute film with 2 songs and on background. It was like a proper film. And Daddy saw it later, and that gave him the confidence that I could possibly direct. Otherwise, he would have never given me the helm for Aamir's launch filming. So yeah, I think I just felt that he had intrinsic faith in me, and he didn't. We used to argue a lot, so the question of advice didn't come in. I don't take advice easily.
But I think you've forgotten one thing. Right through when Mansoor was, in school, and he came out of school, after he came out of school and decided to go to IIT, he was in Bombay IIT, to engineering pad hai. So whenever anyone used to ask Mansoor, "Hey, yaar, you're becoming an engineer," this, that, he went to IIT, then he went to MIT. Shahjahan would always say, "इनको जो करना है करने दो, घूम फिर के इनको यहीं आना." He can go where he wants. Ultimately, वो यहीं आएगा. And that's exactly what happened. That's true. He used to
When
say
I was
that.
leaving for US, Daddy asked me कि मैंने यहाँ दुकान खोल के रखी है. It's ready made. Why on earth do you want to go there? So for me at that time, it was like, now making films is a very respectable, very everybody aspires. For me, it was like, oh come on, yeah. How can you even suggest that? I looked down upon it. To add to that, when we used to go as kids, we didn't know he was famous and all, but we used to criticize him a lot. So we used to go and watch his films, and after the trial, Daddy would say, "To kaisi lagi?" So at least I remember, I don't know whether Nuzhat does, but I would say, "Come on, Daddy, उसमें ये हो जाता है, फिर वो coincidence से वहाँ मिल जाते हैं, फिर ये coincidence हो जाता है, फिर वो ऐसा हो जाता है, फिर इसमें ये ऐसा है." So I used to criticize the whole thing and keep listening to me quietly. At the end of it, it's अच्छा, लेकिन मजा आया कि नहीं? So that was actually his ground principle. You can say all this stuff, but if you enjoy the film, that's...
Actually, his films, as a kid, when I used to watch his films, I remember in Shahjahan's films, I used to feel I'm on a picnic. It's nice, हम लोग outdoor में जा रहे हैं, अच्छे गाने वाले हैं, you know, handsome looking people, there's romance, there's comedy, he's constantly making you laugh. It was like his film used to be like a breezy summer holiday, a breezy picnic, you know. All his films had that quality. And they were very modern films, you know, I mean, in his films, the female characters were very modern. Surprisingly so, I mean, you know, at that time it was very unusual to see that Zeenat Aman is having a wine glass in her hand and all of that, you know, it was his smoking, his female characters were, you know, very modern, and so that was amazing to see.
And if I can add over here, that song sequence, I think it was
Rajiv made his first film at 21, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
extraordinary.
He directed his first film
You
at
know,
20.
I mean, Guru Dutt was 27, so you know, later, but still, they were very young.
Yeah.
And they had a very kind of romantic idea. Yes.
You know, I'd say he was. He wasn't the kind of guy to write poetry or flowers for his wife or anything like that. But you know, I was just thinking, I was looking at these 3 months again, I have to say, and I was pointing out to myself, a lot of the things written into Shami Uncle's character, which seemed to me so much my dad.
Give us some examples.
You know, I'm trying to remember the scene. Some of even the mannerisms or the way, you know, no, never,
The attitude.
you know, the attitude. That I mean, Dad used to talk like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how this came about. Did he write it in? Is this something because Shami Uncle and he were such, you know, good friends that he picked it up unconsciously? I'm not sure, or who picked it up from who. But he was always a very. I saw him as a very passionate man. My dad.
And very youthful. I mean, the very fact is that it's all about young people.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, people talk a lot about, you know, the Nasir Saab's films show people going away on a holiday and this big romance starts on a holiday. But from on a holiday, also the very important thing is you're away from your family. And that gives you freedom. And that freedom allows you to develop personality. And all his films were about people going away also from the family. It wasn't just the picnic. It was, they were not under any authority. They were not answerable. I also wanted to know, Aamir should be able to tell us the relationship between Shami Kapoor and Nasir Saab. Obviously, you as an actor will know that, are you always acting to please the director? And was that the case?
Am I always acting to please the director?
In other words, you've got to have a mirror somewhere.
No, I'm definitely acting to please the director. Because, you know, I believe that filmmaking is one man's vision, and that is the director. The director is narrating the film, and if I'm not able to satisfy him or do what he wants, then, you know, I mean, that's my main goal. But regarding Chashajan and Shami Uncle, you know, Shami Uncle in the start of his career had done, I think, 7-8 films which had not done very well. He was playing characters which were very tragic, and you know, so the Shami Uncle that we grew up knowing, I discovered later was actually in Tumsa Ne Dekha, the character that Shami Uncle plays. So that's the character that Nasir Saab wrote actually for Dev Saab, because Dev Saab is whom he had offered the film to, because he had done Paying Guest, he had done Muneem Ji. And let me go slightly back. So when Nasir Saab first came to Bombay, he was a struggling writer. For very long, he used to ghostwrite. So there were very popular writers who had more work than they could handle, so they would give their work to, you know, people like Chashajan, who was, you know, struggling writer. He needed the money, so he would do ghostwriting. So he would write but not get the credit for the scenes and for the films. And then slowly his talent started getting recognized, and he, you know, got to work individually as himself. And he wrote dialogues for Paying Guest, Muneem Ji, etc. And then finally he wrote the script of Tumsa Ne Dekha. And he told the producer that, I think it was Tularam Jalan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
He told Tularam ji कि ये कहानी जो मैंने लिखी है, ये मैं आपको तभी दूंगा जब आप मुझे डायरेक्ट करने दें. So I want to direct now. And that's how Tumsa Ne Dekha he got to direct. And he got to direct, मतलब Tularam Jalan finally grudgingly said, ठीक है यार, अभी script अच्छी है and I want the script, so I'll allow you to direct. But apparently he got a really shoestring budget, and he told me कि मुझे outdoor के लिए 3 दिन मिले थे. तुलाराम जनाब से तुमको मैं 3 दिन दे रहा हूँ आउटडोर के लिए. And outdoor कहाँ? Ghorbanda Road. Ghorbanda Road, which is, not this linking road, Ghorbanda Road. Slightly ahead, there's another Ghorbanda Road. So that was slightly out of Mumbai. That's where he got the outdoor. कि हाँ, outdoor Ghorbanda Road पे करके हो. So somehow he used to manage and make the film, and that character that we know of Shammi Uncle, which, is the image that we carry in our heads of Shammi Uncle, which is a debonair, charming guy, is actually the image that Nasir Sahab had written, which really, became hand in glove with Shammi Uncle's personality. And for the first time, Shammi Uncle actually performed in that way. And I remember Jajaran Chachian telling me that when Tumsani Dekha finally released, one of the things I remember is that when he shot that song, Tumsa Nahi Dekha, that one, apparently he had used a lot of cuts, And at that time, films were not cut so fast. So at the end of the song, he's gone into multiple cuts and, small cuts of 12 frames. And so when Tularam Jalan saw the edit, he was like, "Are you mad? What is chakkar aa raha hai? Mujhe to main dekh nahi pa raha hu. Itne cuts tumne dal diye hain." So the editor and Tularam Jalan were both very keen that song should be cut differently. But Jajan said, no, this, I don't want you to touch this. And he stuck to his guns. And when the film was about to release, Tularam Jalan was like, anyway, this film is gone. Because Shammi Uncle had not had any successes until then. And I think Nas was a theatre where the premiere
Nas
was.
Cinema.
Nas Cinema. And I remember they had a premiere on the day of the release. So if it was a Friday evening was a special show when the tickets were sold in the stall. And the invitees were in the balcony. And when the film began, Shammi Uncle and Geeta Auntie and Chacharan Chachian had come together in Shammi Uncle's car. And they had come to the show and he said that we sat in the balcony and the film began. And, suddenly there were noises from the stall which were coming. And Shammi Uncle kept asking Chacharan, are they booing the film? Are they booing the film? Because he was so used to his films not being liked, He couldn't understand कि उनको अच्छी लग रही, बुरी लग रही है, किस कर गया. So Chacharan was saying, no, they're clapping, they're enjoying the film. So he couldn't believe it. He kept asking Chacharan, Nasir, ये हंस रहा है कि रो रहा है? मतलब क्या हो रहा है? And the film was very loved and that first show itself became huge. And Chacharan says that day, Shammi Uncle, from being someone who until then had not really become successful, that day he became a star. Because Chacharan said, when I came out of the theatre, I couldn't find Shammi anywhere. And Chachian and him had to go home in a tanga because they had come with Shammi Uncle in the car. So he said, वो तो इतना mob हो गया, वो पता नहीं यहाँ से वहाँ सब, he was out of, he couldn't even reach him. And as usual, the writers and directors are unrecognized. So उनको धक्के वक्के पड़े. And finally, it was his first film, no one knew who he was also. So he said कि Chachian and I were happy कि चलो लोगों को film पसंद आ रही है. They got into a tanga and then they went.
How lovely.
Yeah.
How lovely to have grown up and knowing all this. I think I'm envious of you. But I want you to say something about the writing that Nasir Sahab had in terms of Devanand and paying guest and so on were very playful characters, especially paying guest. And it seemed that the marriage of this playfulness, which is in words, went into the physicality of the playfulness, which is Shammi Kapoor.
Yeah.
So he got, when people talk, here there must be people very interested in world cinema, and they always say, like, a man like Truffaut, many of you must have seen Truffaut's films, he had his alter ego, was a young actor called Jean-Pierre Léaud. And in a funny way, I think Shammi Kapoor became the alter ego of Nasir Sahab.
I think the one actor who really brought Chacharan's writing to bloom fully.
He could render it.
Yeah.
Because
And
Shammi Uncle really,
he rendered it the way my dad would have imagined it.
And I just want to add again here to what you said. In fact, your write-up on Shammi ji also says this, that physicality was a very important part of his persona, and that's that physicality comes out in the characters that Nasir Sahab wrote. So, yes, with Joy Mukherjee, Fil Wahi Dil Laaya. So basically, that passing of the baton happens in Teesri Manzil, where that manic energy which Shammi Kapoor is exuding then gets transmitted to R.D. Burman's music, and that's a turning point in. Karwa is about these itinerant Banjaras and therefore music.
With Elvis Presley.
And
What about Nusrat? Do you feel that he was influenced?
Yes, definitely. Not just Elvis Presley, the Beatles, all of these, the early music stars, the 60s, most definitely. And I think, again, the physicality of Elvis Presley was quite different from all the other stars, the music stars of the time. And I'm wondering if anybody else sees a link between that and...
I think
And Chami Uncle.
yeah.
I think Elvis Presley was copying Chami Uncle. कहीं देखा होगा तुमसा नहीं देखा हाँ इसको कॉपी करो
No, I had asked Shami Kapoor something interesting, and you could see it from Tumsa Nahi Dekha. I said that when he was in a song sequence, it was very fascinating to me where the cuts took place in a song. So he said to me, oh, because it was very simple, because when I knew they should cut, they had to cut. So I thought this was brilliant. And if you see his shots, he's kind of flopping out, a little bit like I did the act with my chair, and he disappears. So unbelievable, that confidence of the edit. And he's always said, Shami Kapoor has always said that he was not a good dancer. But
That's not true.
I mean, I've spent a lot of time with Shami Uncle. And he when I got to know him properly and, was spending a lot of time with him, by then he was a very loving, warm, person. But he told me that, in my youth I was really bratish. And, matlab, abhi jo aaj ke brats hain, he would put them to shame. That's how bratish he was. And he's told me a lot of stories which I'm not going to repeat over here. But, so I can imagine him, I mean, the combination of him at his, peak of brattiness with Jasharan and the two of them, working together.
Yeah, I just want to say something about that, because we're talking so much about Shami Uncle and Dad. I think that a lot of what my dad was as a character inside, but which he wrote, but he didn't do himself physically. I think that he saw that Shami Uncle had that. So, for instance, not every evening, quite often when Shami Uncle came over home, I remember in the evenings, and this used to be very late, and I used to be very small and wanting to go to sleep, but too excited to go to sleep because all the grown-ups are there and playing all this exciting music. I don't know if you remember this, but Dad would put the music on, but he wouldn't dance. Shami Uncle was the one who was dancing. And this would be in that little bedroom of ours, parents' bedroom, because just next door is my dad's mum and aunts and all of that, and couldn't make too much noise also. But this is what he used to be doing, and so I saw Dad as providing the sound and the music and
the rhythm, really.
Yeah. But it was not, he was never the one who
personified it.
Yes.
But I think you've forgotten one night when he didn't dance normally. But one night he played, there was a Punjabi folk song. You remember that? And it was such an appealing song that all of us were dancing. No, not Runa, that was Soni Kalliwal. That was hers? Acha. I didn't know whose it was. Yeah, but I remember him dancing and really enjoying that song. And it was a frothy folk song, Punjabi folk song. So it's not that he couldn't dance. He just...
No, yeah, I have seen him dancing. He didn't do it very well.
And would you say he was an introvert or extrovert?
He was an extrovert.
He was an extrovert.
He would hold, like in a party or in a sitting, he would be the center of, repartees,
but with his
humor,
words.
narrative, yeah.
With his words.
Yeah.
And, we talked a lot about Mansoor.
He was a very charming character. Very charming. He had, he had very intense eyes, and he was a very winning personality. And very funny. He was very, very funny.
We talked a lot about Mansoor's work and, of course, Aamir's. Nusrat, did he ever guide you in terms of what you should do in life? Did he think you should work in films?
Never. You remember, we were the generation that didn't think it was a good thing to work in films, and especially women. So there was no question about me doing anything with the movies. It would never have occurred to my father, and it didn't occur to me. So I did my, I went to school, I went to college, and at a certain point, like Mansoor, ghoom phir ke I came back to the films, but just very minimally at the time of QSQT.
So Nusrat, Mansoor, me and Shahjahan, the four of us worked on that script. And so Nusrat was involved in the writing of a number of scripts, including Raat, by the way. Ask your wife.
Who's laughing? Okay.
But
You know the inside jokes.
Yeah, but that was just a little bit.
did you argue about language and dialogue?
On the mic, on the mic.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, for QSQT, we all worked together. Aamir and Nusrat's main job was to resolve the conflict between my dad and me.
Actually, what happened, I'll tell you, QSQT was being directed by Shahjahan. And Mansoor was writing Jo Jeeta at that time, as his first film. So then at one point when the script was complete, Shahjahan fell ill and he had to go through an operation and all, bypass. So he was not in a position to direct the film. You know, he couldn't take the strain of directing a film so quickly after the operation. So he told Mansoor कि भाई तुम अपने script के साथ struggle कर रहे हो, ये हमारी ready है, तुम सुन लो, अगर अच्छी लगे तो तुम ये बना लो पहले. So Mansoor said okay, he heard the script and he said yeah, I like it and I want to do it. But I might need a few changes in the script. And then began a writing, part where we were correcting the rewriting part, in which the few things that Mansoor wanted to change was actually 80% of the whole script. So, but the story remained the same. But and I remember that when Mansoor was not the director, and Nusrat and I was working with Shahjahan, Nusrat and I would keep fighting with him about about the way that because we were coming from a different generation and we were thinking differently, and we kept fighting with him. But he was a director, so ultimately Nusrat and I used to give in. Okay, now he's not listening to us, and he obviously knows what he wants, and he's a director, so we would write as per his requirement and guidance. When Mansoor came in, we were like, yes, suddenly we had, so the three of us used to be against him. So Shahjahan used to be, तुम लोग इतनी बड़ी गलती कर रहे हो, तुमको पता नहीं तुम लोग क्या कर रहे हो, पागल हो गए तुम लोग. So he used to get really upset with us. But then he would, he went along because now he also realized that now the director is Mansoor and we have to all work towards, Mansoor's requirement.
But his guidance, I mean, at that time when we would argue, I mean, I had vague ideas in my mind, like this scene shouldn't be like this. So you would say, like, but what should it be like? You can't just say, this is too boring, this is that. And I'd come up with quite wacko ideas,
Well, one of the things which was an absolute delight to get to know when I was interviewing them, and I interviewed them multiple times, which basically
original title was Nafrat ke Waris,
which was basically an offshoot from this dialogue where Aamir in Qayamat se Qayamat Tak, he goes to Randhir Singh and he says, मैं और रश्मि आप दोनों के नफरत के वारिस बनने को तैयार नहीं हैं. And so, as Mansoor said that, we were thinking very literally that animosity has to come out in the title. So, Nafrat ke Waris or Darar. Darar was another title. But, here again, you appreciate Nasir Hussain. See, the thing about Nasir Hussain is that we remember him now for fun, frothies.
But it's also funny that while my dad, I often thought about this, that while he suggested Qayamat se Qayamat Tak, I don't think he had gone started shooting yet.
No.
He hadn't gone for shooting.
No.
So, in my dad's mind, when you say Qayamat se Qayamat Tak, it means you're actually expecting a sad end.
Right.
So, though he thought of the title, but he was not
in favor of a sad end.
That used to be another bone of contention between us.
Yes.
But
once you had
actually, you know what? Now I'm remembering slightly. I remember that in English we used to say that titles for this film should be something like. See, Nafrat ke Waris, I used to always feel कि यार बहुत ही मतलब गाढ़ा type का है Nafrat ke Waris and all. It sounds very strange, too obvious. So one of the titles, if you remember, we used to discuss was From Here to Eternity. इसमें ऐसा कुछ feel होना चाहिए, From Here to Eternity. And that is when Shahjahan said Qayamat se Qayamat Tak.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The duck
And
from here
and
to here.
just on the other hand,
So, and see, I'll tell you, it was very difficult for me to work with Majru Saab after he is used to working with my dad, who was a literature, you know, sort of Urdu literature person. And I used to talk to him in English, but he was so flexible. Majru Saab was so flexible. He said, "आप अपने तरीके से बताइए." You explain to me in your words, कि what is the boy saying, or what is the girl saying, and stuff like that. I used to do things like that. So इसमें actually मैंने ये thought शायद दी थी, roughly like that, you know, that this boy doesn't know where he's going, whereas actually he's a romantic, and his that which comes in the antara, second antara. So he came up with the line, "Papa कहते हैं ये वो तो." I didn't like it one bit.
You were cringing.
I was cringing, you know, but everybody else liked it.
It's an interesting line because, I mean, psychologically, it really is seeking the approval of the dad.
Yeah.
You know, which you said earlier on in our conversation.
Yeah.
I remember Majru Saab telling me, you know, the song was written, it was recorded, and it turned out rather well. So we were sitting at Lime around that time, I think, and Majru Saab telling me, "Beta, देखो गाना तो बड़ा अच्छा है, अब तुम्हारे ऊपर है तुम कैसे करो?" I was like, "That's a nice way of putting it. No pressure, beta. Super hit गाना है, अब तुमको करना है."
And in terms of when you went from being an assistant, Nasir Saab was clear he wanted to launch you as an actor.
No, he wasn't clear actually.
He wasn't. Tell
You
us.
see,
about
what
that.
happened is that for me, when I wanted to be an actor, I was very conscious about one thing, that I never wanted Nasir Saab or Chachajan or Abbajan to ever feel, you know, that now it is our responsibility to launch Aamir. I didn't want them to ever feel that. I didn't want to be a, you know, burden on them. So I knew by that time I wanted to act, and I was doing my own thing. I used to go to FTI, I used to do diploma films over there. I was doing theatre. I did a film called Holy, you know, which Ketan had directed at the Film Institute. So I was doing my own thing, but I never ever, even by mistake, I used to not mention to Chacharan or to Abbajan about me wanting to act, and you know, because I didn't want to even come close to that. So two things happened. And coincidentally, both these things happened with a very famous couple of today. What happened is that I did a short film called Paranoia, which Aditya Bhattacharya had made. This is much before I'm talking of, you know, when I passed out of school, 10th, and just before the first year college began, in the holidays, I shot for this film called Paranoia, which was a 40-minute short film, entirely silent, meaning no dialogue, no music, nothing, not even a pen ka sound. So he had made that film, and he made it as an experiment to learn about cinema, and you know, he wanted to learn filmmaking. And so he asked me, I was in school with him, I was his classmate. So he said, "Okay, will you act in it?" And I said, "Okay." I mean, he said, I need your help. I need another boy, something like you. Can I? So I said, "Okay." So I was the actor on the film. I was also the production manager and the assistant director and the spot boy and everything. So basically, I was helping Aditya. And the experience of doing that film actually got me interested in filmmaking. Until then I wasn't. But I'm saying something else now. So the film got complete and he wanted to show it, so he called Shabana ji to Dimple Theatre. And Shabana ji was the only person sitting at the theatre and watching the film. It was a silent film and it was pretty, you know, difficult to fathom what Aditya was trying to say. Usually it's difficult to fathom what he's trying to say. So the film khatam hui. And Shabana ji is a very, you know, outspoken person. So Aditya's mother, Rinki auntie, was next to her. And Aditya was sitting behind them and I was sitting right at the back with my sister Nikhat, who's there. Now mind you, nobody in my house knows I've gone to shoot for this film. Because my dad will just kill me if he comes to know, okay, Aamir shooting karne ja raha hai. I didn't even tell Ammi. So I used to pretend I'm going for a hockey match early morning. Ammi hamari hockey match hai. Main hockey stick leke jata tha, actually shooting pe jata tha. So khair, Shabana ji was watching the film and she saw the film, she got up and said, "I didn't understand the film, but who's that boy?" So Rinki auntie said, "Oh, piche baitha hai, Tahir ka beta." So she said, "Where?" And she turned around and I got up, I said, "Hello ma'am." So Rinki auntie said, "This is Tahir Saab's son." Now Shabana ji was working with my father at that time in a film called Khoon Ki Pukar. The shooting was going on. "You're Tahir Saab's son. I must tell him you're a fantastic actor." I said, "No, you can't tell him that. You can't tell him that. He'll kill me." So she said, why? I said, no, you can't tell him that. So she said, but you're a fantastic actor, you should be acting. So I was so thrilled because I really look up to Shabana ji as an actress, and when she said that, I was like, wow, like I felt so good that someone who I respect so much as an actor is telling me that she's like, you're really amazing, and you have no idea how well you've done, and you really should act. I was like, okay. And then I joined Jishan as a AD, and I remember it was towards the end of the shooting of Zabardast, and we were in Faryaz Hotel, we were shooting there in Khandala, Lonavala. And Javed Saab had come to work on Mr. India's script. And he was also working on the script of Arjun. So Shekhar was there, Javed Saab was there, Rahul Ravel was there. And I was sitting in Nasir Saab's room doing some paperwork. And Javed Saab walked in to say hi to Nasir Saab. So they were meeting after a long time, they were exchanging whatever. And they were talking and catching up after a long time. And then finally, after about half an hour, Javed Saab asked Jishan, wo kaun beta hai? Who's that boy over there? I was sitting near the window. So he said, ye Tahir ka beta hai. So he says, ye kya kar raha hai aapke sath? He said, wo mera assistant hai. So Javed Saab said, ye aapka assistant kyun hai? So aapko star hona chahiye. मेरे कान खड़े थे, सब सुन रहा था मैं दूर से कि क्या बातें हो रही हैं. And it's quite ironical that both Shabana and Javed Saab who are together today individually noticed me at separate places and said the same thing. Even after that, I never had the courage to tell my uncle or my father कि यार अब Javed Saab कह रहे हैं I'm star material. So I just completely ignored it. I didn't even want to bring it up. I was so frightened that he would feel कि अरे यार. I didn't ever want Jajjan to feel कि Aamir expects me to make a film for him. Now I'll have to. I didn't want that. So one day, I was with Jajjan and I used to be with him all the time. So we met someone he was meeting after many years. And he said, hello, how are you, this, that, they were catching up. And then he said, Aamir, meet so-and-so, he's an old friend of mine. And he said, so-and-so, meet, this is my nephew Aamir and he's the star of my next film. And I was like, whoa, that's how I came to know that I'm going to be acting in this next film. And then a few days later, he called me and said, okay, listen, I think I want to make a film with you. It's going to be a love story and all of that. So, yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
And no specific advice about acting?
No. So I'm saying, all along, I always thought Jishan does not want me to be an actor. And it's actually he and Mansoor saw Holi at some point, if you remember. And I think at some point, after that, they felt maybe. Yeah.
And Nusrat, what do you think your father would have felt, both of you, about a book being?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Because, my dad was very used to not getting awards. He never got any Filmfare award, or anything like that. And all his accolades were not, so I think he would be a little apprehensive about somebody looking closely at his work. He said, film dekho na, ye kya hai?
It's a tragedy that, I think there's only...
We have to say Guru that same thing.
Oh, you're kidding.
He got it as a producer for Sahibi Bi Ghulam.
And Pyasa?
And it was Mehboob Saab that year. Mother India was the same year.
Yeah.
So
I didn't say that.
I think he'd be surprised about this book.
I think he would be shy.
He'd be shy about
I
it.
think he would be shy. He'd be like, nahi, kya kitab kya hai? People will watch my film if they want to. He would be. I think he would be shy.
you think he would read it?
I don't think so.
No chance. No chance he would never read.
How interesting. And you would just one last question before I ask. I would like to ask one question to Imran, who is here. But before that, I want to know: did you all speak in Urdu at home, or how did you converse?
Both Urdu and English both.
It depended on what the subject was.
And how is his English?
It really depended.
No, his English was good. His English was good. His Urdu was better, of course. But he was most comfortable in English.
And Mansoor, you're defining the subject. Can you give us some more information?
I want to hear that.
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell you, but there were certain very colloquial things which you can only say in, Urdu. Yeah, so we were just used to that.
I have to tell you a funny little thing. It was what Nusrat told me. I had gone to interview Mansoor about his work with Majroo Sahab one day, and I said to Nusrat, he's such an honest.
Yeah.
So
We try and keep all our secrets hidden from Mansoor.
I would like to. Imran, you grew
Hi,
up.
everyone.
Obviously, you are his grandson. What do you remember? Because there's always a wonderful relationship with the grandfather. And was he curious about your youth? Because he was so youthful in himself.
Strangely, I never really saw my grandfather as a filmmaker. To me, he was Nana. He loved telling stories. This is actually my most enduring memory of him. That every evening, and every single evening from the time I was maybe 3 years old, I remember he would tell me a new story, and he would make it up as he went along. Generally, I was the star of the stories. So Imran would go here and do this and then that, and everything. He would weave in bits of adventure stories, science fiction, just all sorts of stuff. And that continued. He passed away when I was 19, and I remember even up till that point, generally in the evenings I would try and spend a little bit of time with him, go and sit down, and it was always about chatting. It was always that was our relationship. To me, I never saw him as a filmmaker until much later when I started watching his films. He was just.
And did he want you to be an actor?
Nobody in the family wanted me to work in films. I think that's how we've always done it.
Family
Every-
tradition.
Every generation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's give him a Now we've got about 25 minutes, and we're going to take some questions. Now, first of all, I'd like to say something.
I met, so there were a lot of people within the world of Hindi cinema, people who had acted with him, worked with him. But also, this book came out of meeting with people who blog on Hindi cinema, on Hindi cinema of the 50s and 60s, people who've written on Hindi cinema, people like Jerry Pinto, Aniruddha Bhattacharjee, National Film Archives of India, and besides that, I mean, I saw each of Nasir
Point of time when these 3 months will happen, Pancham was not a big music director, he was probably just starting off. So how did this collaboration or how did this relationship come
I don't know if everyone can hear, but basically he's asked about the relationship between.
Panchamangal was starting out.
Yeah.
Actually, I only remember one incident from that, and because I was too small at that time. Was I born at that time? 67? No, I wasn't born. 65. Sorry, 65 I was born, yeah. So I was about 2 years old. But I heard about this incident. Chichan had told me about this, that when Shammi Uncle came into the film, after that entire drama that happened, when Shammi Uncle came back into the film,
You have to say what the drama was. Some people may not.
Drama हुआ ना? Dev Saab was in the film earlier, फिर Dev Saab, हाँ, वो drama. When finally Shammi Uncle was came into the film, the first thing Chichan told him, because Shammi Uncle was very particular about music. He was very particular कि यार मेरी film में music कौन दे रहा है, music कैसा है, how are the songs. So Shammi Uncle asked him कि ये कौन नया लड़का है, R.D. Burman कौन है, तो Chichan said आप उसके गाने सुनो. He's made some amazing songs. So of course Shammi Uncle also trusted Chichan's judgment on music. But there was a session held at Pali. That's the house we call Pali actually. Where Pancham Uncle had come with the harmonium and his entire team, tabla babla ye wo. And he sang all the songs to Shammi Uncle in the drawing room downstairs. And apparently Shammi Uncle, on hearing each song, was getting so excited that he got up and started dancing, while the music session was going on, and so that was like a test for Pancham Uncle. Okay, once Shammi Uncle is in the film, if Shammi Uncle really hates the songs, then there'll be there might be a rethink of who will compose or whatever. But so that was the beginning of Pancham Uncle's career, and that's the only incident. It was his fifth film.
Fifth film. Correct.
Yeah.
And can I just
Actually, QSQT, though Dad later on became nervous about the tragic end, I have to say that the way the story came about was, because this was a conversation that I had with him, was that we were thinking of a story that was a tragic ending. So
Like a Romeo and Juliet.
it was
a classic.
Exactly. So we started out from that
Right.
point.
I also think that, and maybe
Yeah, he was very influenced by P.G. Woodhouse, Agatha Christie, you're right.
The title having multiple meanings, like this is the first time I've seen DC Mantra, but all his other movies. Floor from which the girl jumps.
Yes.
Even Agatha Christie's books, the titles are referenced within the books, and they have multiple meanings. They not only mean like what's going to happen, but also how the person is feeling.
Yes, he did. He did read popular books. Yeah, he did.
there was a question over here. There's a gentleman.
Uh,
Did everybody here at the back?
what are the things that I've learned from Tisharan? Some important things while I was assistant. You know, I think one of the things that I remember him saying. In fact, he and Abbajan would both say that, and that's probably my biggest lesson. He said whenever someone came to pitch a story to them or a script to them, at the end of the narration, they would tell the writer or director, "Tell me your story in one line." एक लाइन में अपनी कहानी बताइए क्या है? अगर आप एक लाइन में नहीं बता सकते तो गड़बड़. What he was actually saying, which today, you know, if you read books on screenplay writing, he was asking what is the premise of your film, which comes in one line. So that's one big take home for me. And I think the other is, I remember him saying once, you know, actor को scene समझ के करना चाहिए. You need to understand इसका वजन क्या है, what is the scene trying to say. So actually there are many things that I picked up, you know, all along, because I spent 4 years with him, and I was with him during the shoot, during post-production, during the edit, right through. And for the music sessions also.
तीसरी मंजिल का कोई पर्टिकुलर गाना जो आपके बेहद करीब हो?
सारे गाने बहुत ही कमाल के हैं, लेकिन एक इंसिडेंट मैं आपको बोलता हूँ. I don't know how many people know that song. तुमने मुझे देखा, वो जो गाना है ना, that time Shami uncle went through a tragedy because he lost Geeta ji at that time, and that set was up in Mehboob, and I remember Jasan saying that when Shami uncle lost Geeta ji, he was distraught. He was like really sad and he was really distraught. And, of course, they didn't shoot, and Jajan told Shami uncle that whenever you want to shoot, let me. I think a few months later, Shami uncle called him up and said that, okay, let's continue the shoot. And Jajan had not broken on the set; he had kept it standing, you know. And the song that you see in the film is the first thing that Shami uncle shot for. The first shooting that Shami uncle did after Geeta ji passed away was that song. तुमने मुझे देखा होकर मेहरबान.
He had a very sad expression. It comes across, I think.
Yeah, so that was the first thing he shot for after she had passed away.
There's a gentleman here, and then anybody else, can you put your hands up so I can identify you? Where?
Right at the back.
All right, right at the back. Okay. Okay, so after we come to you.
I don't think there was any reason because he and you know, they were both very fond of each other because whenever I was with Tishan and we would bump into Goldie Uncle, I think we just, you know, in films what happens is that you have to realize that we are like gypsies. We do a film together, and when we're doing the film, the whole team that's working together, the actors, the crew, we are living out of each other's pockets. You know, you meet a person and within 3 days you're like telling him your heartbreak story and all of that. So we get used to a life where you take very little time to come close to a person. And then 6 months later or 1 year later, we pick up our tents and go on somewhere else. I move on to some other film, you know, my other actors move on to some other film. Then we meet after 5 years, 10 years. Why are we not working together again? Hota hai, chance hota hai, nahi hota hai. So I think both Goldie Uncle and Nasir Saab had great fondness for each other, and they had high respect and regard for each other. I think what Jajan wrote in Teesri Manzil, Goldie Uncle brought out beautifully. I mean, the song picturizations in Teesri Manzil are outstanding. So there's no real reason why they didn't work together. I think Goldie Uncle was doing his own thing.
The same could actually, in fact, this was a question.
I remember one incident of that, which is to do with writing, because Salim Javed came to Jajan one day and said, Jajan, हम लोगों को अपना नासा भी problem है, हम एक और फिल्म लिख रहे हैं, जिसकी कहानी सेम है. तो he said, कौन सी कहानी, कौन सी फिल्म है वो? He said कि वो फिल्म का नाम है जंजीर, प्रकाश मेहरा जी बना रहे हैं, और जंजीर जो है उसकी कहानी और यादों की बारात की कहानी आइडेंटिकल है, इट्स अ रिवेंज स्टोरी। तो जिजान ने कहा आप सुनाइए क्या कहानी है। तो they had obviously written Zanjeer and they narrated the script of Zanjeer to Nasir. So this is what he had told me. So he said कि I heard the script and I said कि आप बिल्कुल बेफिक्र रहिए, ये दो टोटली अलग फिल्म है क्योंकि मैं जो फिल्म बना रहा हूँ वो उसमें म्यूजिक will play such an important part and he was so right. If you look at Zanjeer today and you look at यादों की बारात, they're totally there's no similarity that you can see between the two.
And he
when the story is the same, story वही है कि वो अपना बदला देता है।
and he balances that
How do the brothers come back
through
the song?
Through song.
यादों की they remember that song.
Yeah.
So music plays such an integral part of his
And
story.
you might also say that, you know,
Horse, but इसमें it's the song that brings them back. So it's, you know,
I have to just say a little aside. I don't know who found.
Bati's autobiography. In fact,
I
Salim
think
Saab
there's a
mentioned.
gentleman right at the back who has been waiting a long time.
Good evening, everyone. Adab.
hi Adam.
Mr. Aamir Khan, Saab, this question is for you. Your senior generation wasn't very supportive of you. I mean, they didn't really encourage you when you wanted to join films.
My senior generation, matlab you're talking of Chajan and Bajan.
That's right. That's right. Your father and your uncle.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, similarly, when Imran decided to get into films, how supportive were you with Imran?
I produced a film for him.
That's right. So, because Imran just mentioned that nobody from his family was supportive, but you did produce a film for him.
Yeah, no. I think he was joking. When Imran said he wanted to act, I mean, I was very happy about it. And in fact, at that time, Jammu Sugandh was producing the film. And yeah, so I was not producing. It was Jammu Sugandh producing it, and apna Abbas was writing and directing it. And I knew that Imran is interested in acting, and he's going. I always like to leave people alone. I don't want to start interfering in Imran's life or in anyone's life, you know. So I knew he was doing something, and whenever he needed my help or something, I knew that he would come to me. And if he didn't need my help, he wouldn't. So as it so happened, when he came and told me that, you know, we are having trouble with that film, and perhaps Jammuji is, you know, not in a position to make the film at this point of time. So that's when I first asked Jammuji, are you making the film or not making the film? He said, "नहीं, मैं अभी नहीं बना पाऊँगा. If you want to take over, you can." So I heard the script, I liked the script, and you know, we did a screen test. We did about 6-7 scenes, and did the casting. And so I mean, if I was not supportive of him being an actor, I wouldn't have gone ahead with that.
There's another question there. Yes.
हमारे एल्डर्स क्या सोच रहे हैं, हमारे आजकल तो मैं सोचता हूँ मेरे यंगस्टर्स क्या सोच रहे हैं, मुझे कुछ पता नहीं. My kids don't agree with me half the time.
My question is to you. So my name is Krutarth Desai and I am a big fan of yours. मेरे लिए बहुत बड़े सुपरस्टार हो. So sir, getting inspired from you, मेरा एक विजन है कि मैं किडी प्रोडक्शन स्टार्ट करना चाहता हूँ खुद का.
Oh, are we talking about Nasir साहब?
हाँ सर, एक ही बात की सर, आपका जो पूरे लाइफ स्पैन में आपने कोई ऐसा, आप मुझे कोई एक ऐसा मैसेज देना चाहोगे which I can carry with my entire career, कि like आपने जो सीख ली हो.
Strictly speaking, this is not about Nasir साहब.
No, it isn't about Nasir साहब at all. I think you have.
और मैं क्या एडवाइस दूँ आपको यार, आप अच्छा ही करोगे. I think.
There is a yes.
Follow your heart.
And where's the lady?
Follow your heart.
Lady, okay, we'll go with him. A quick question, and then go to the.
Like, what is your definition
Oh no,
of modernity?
Let's talk about Nasir Saab's women.
Yeah,
that would
I
be
mean,
much more the point. Can you take?
Yeah, like while directing, or how do you usually portray a modern woman? What is the definition?
Someone who's independent, someone who has her own mind.
Okay. Not through like if you just show them drinking or smoking. I don't think so. That is a concept of being modern.
No. I think you might have misunderstood what I was saying earlier. A woman who's independent enough to decide what she wants to do, and she doesn't need to take permission from anyone.
Yes, sir.
So when she does things like having alcohol or cigarette, she's not seeking anyone's permission to do that. Independent woman.
Okay, there's a.
She may be doing other things also. I'll just give it as an example.
Can you just?
I'm not quite sure whether he said much to me. No, he didn't. No, he didn't give me any inspirational words. Yeah, he didn't come to set. Jajant, in the entire shooting of Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak, he never came on set except for one scene. The only scene he came to set for was the interval scene. but otherwise he was not on set, so he didn't really say much to me. He kind of he left us to it. Yeah, he left us to it.
But it's interesting that it's integral
But
because
he
it's
would
crucial.
give me one. He would say one thing to me repeatedly. कि happy ending जरूर shoot करना. So that was a constant refrain that he had with me.
They shoot तो किया हमने.
And you
मैंने
did
shoot किया.
We shot both
और
ends.
कभी देखा नहीं उसको.
Yeah.
We didn't even edit it.
Okay, there was a
Yeah, so but great music also. So was he? How did he take failure when he was consistently a successful filmmaker? And even Zamane Ko Dikhana Hai did well, but not as
Not that well.
Yeah. So how did it take failure?
I think all three of us have our different point of views, perhaps. You.
Yeah, because actually those two films came much later. I mean, they came later. Zamane Ko Dikhana Hai was the first film which actually delivered a shock to him. And I can say that because I didn't spend as much time maybe as Aamir did with him, but that phase I was spending time with him. And I remember going to my dad used to go first day, first show and see the movie. You know, he had a lot of courage. I can't do that. So he used to go and he wanted to feel what the audience was feeling. First time, yeah. And I remember going there with him, and I remember that the film was going brilliantly, you know, throughout. Like in the beginning, it's entertainment, music. The audience was totally with the film. And suddenly something went wrong.
Last 4 years.
In the last, yes, pre-climax. You know, and the audience was suddenly out of it. And we came out and we were driving back, and I could see he was shattered. And he took it very bad, actually, because I think one was that he had got used to.
He had never seen failure.
He had never seen it actually. And
he had never seen failure in his entire career.
So yeah, he didn't take it well.
Even I remember that he was quite depressed, and he was really mourning the fact that the film had to work. I remember that.
And he had one question of me, you know, because when the trials used to happen, the first trial, second, third, fourth, and I used to go for them. The audience used to enjoy it a lot. You know, all the people who were called. So it was going from strength to strength to strength. And then maybe on the fifth trial, when we got into the car, I told him, "Daddy, it's not working." He says, "What do you mean it's not working? Everybody else likes it." So I said, "I don't know, it's just not working." And I couldn't pin it, what it was that made me feel it was not working. But much later, I was able to analyze, you know, why it didn't work. And I feel, if I have to share that with you, because he asked me that day when we went back, maybe 3 days later, because he went into a bit of a shock. About a week later, he asked me, you know, he said, "You were the only guy who used to say that it's not working. So what was your reason for it?" And I was forced to think of the reason. And then sort of it occurred to me, I said, you know what, the film starts about the hero, trying to prove to his father that he can do something. And the moment he gets into the car, he sees a pretty girl, and then he keeps wooing her for the next, 80% of the film. And now you want to come back to the story, and tell me, oh, actually this was the story. So he did take it badly, and he wanted to.
But I have another theory for that. See, Zamane Ko Dikhana Hai, with its whatever structural issues that it may have had, and we can go into an analysis of that. But I have to say that whenever I saw Zamane Ko Dikhana Hai, I loved it. It used to, but you have to know that the trial used to end. Screening used to end at "Hey Kanchi, hey" train का गाना. वो गाना खत्म होता था, trial खत्म होता था. Last के 4 रील shoot नहीं हुए थे. So those trials which used to end with there continue के अभी 4 रील shoot होके आनी है. We used to love it. I used to just love that film. And everyone used to love it. See, Chashma was a very emotional man. Now, what happened is that he and Tariq Bhai were not, getting along well for some time. And after very long, and Tariq Bhai's career, of course, then after that didn't do very well, and then Tariq Bhai came back to him and told him that, I really need your help. Can you do something for me? Now, Nasir Saab is essentially an emotional person. So what he did is, which I think he should have never done, quite honestly, but because he was concerned about Tariq Bhai, and he was, he loved Tariq Bhai, so he said, okay, and he changed the last 4 reels from his original script, and he added the character of Tariq Bhai, who comes from nowhere. And he had to then explain कि who is this person, why is he here, उसका क्या backstory है. तो वो इतना mess हो गया last 4 reels. You remember, Mansoor? So last 4 reels became a mess because after shooting 80% of the film, he suddenly decided, okay, I'm going to bring in a new character. And I'm going to give this role to Tariq Bhai, who's asking me for help, so I'm going to do what it takes. So he did that. He tried his best. He rewrote those last, the end of the film, and tried to bring in this character, and that is what messed it up, according to me. If he had just gone with what he had originally written, then according to me, the film would have been a success. With its limitations, it would have been a success, with what Mansoor was saying. Because it was a very enjoyable film. It was a very enjoyable film right up till that point. And then it should just go downhill from there.
I have a question. I remember hearing a story.
Can you stand up?
Yes.
Strict about
Particular
that.
about that.
Yeah, he was very particular about
Yes. No one has raised this, but I would like us to just discuss a little bit, because I've been told we have another 10 minutes or so. His heroes and today's heroes.
I think that, his heroes, Jajan's heroes were always very attractive because they were so charming, they had a great sense of humor, they were very romantic. They were, so that kind of a personality. Also, usually his heroes were, the guy who's not well off. तो underdog का एक angle भी होता था, लड़की अमीर है, So it's a very lovable kind of a character. So even today you will have, that if you go into that space, there are a lot of examples of characters, and even today's films where a lot of actual examples where the hero is charming, he's funny, he's Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, or a lot of Shah Rukh's films actually where he's played the romantic lead is very much in that zone, of that hero, who's very charming, and you fall in love with him.
Because as Aditya Chopra said, he was very influenced. He thought that the hero of you were the hero for Mansoor in Qayamat Se, and Shah Rukh was his hero, and Prem was the hero of Suraj. And these three heroes, again he talks about his influences from obviously Raj Kapoor and Nasir Saab. Do you, just because he worked with such a fabulous team, do you think that it was a given that he'd always work with the same lyricist, for example?
Jajan? Yeah, Jajan always worked with Majrooh Sahab, he always worked with, mostly with Pancham Uncle, from the time that he started working with Pancham Uncle. His DOP, Munir Khan Sahab, was consistently working with him. In the early times he used other DOPs, but once Munir Khan came and he was working consistently with him. His sound recordist was Manna Day? Manna Ladia, sorry. Manna Ladia was a sound recordist, and that was, in every film Manna Ladia ji was there.
Choreographer.
Suresh Bhatt, choreographer.
P.L. Raj?
No. So, well, he did do the earlier films, but once he, for example, so all these people, once they came into his life, Suresh Bhatt, that was a team that consistently worked together to make films.
Yeah, and I think it's also that it's not just Nasir Saab declining in the 80s, it's also that team around him which is, going through a...
But I also feel that, he really missed Shammi Uncle and Rishi Ji. See, because he wrote films in a particular style. So if you look at Manzil Manzil, if you look at the script, Sunny is in the film, and Sunny is a great star, he's a wonderful actor. But that's not his kind of cinema, That film needed a Shammi Kapoor, it needed a Rishi Kapoor to bring it to life. Sunny is more appropriate for Arjun and, films like that where we love watching him.
More action heroes.
Yeah. And more brooding, and that's his quality. But Jajan had actually written it for that same character he used to write. So I think that he also was, on some level, was missing, actually the best. It's ironical that the actors who worked best in his hero were all Kapoors. So there was Shammi Kapoor, there was Shashi Kapoor, and Rishi Kapoor. They best brought out, and in all of those, I think Shammi Uncle was the one who really brought out his characters to the full.
Absolutely alter ego.
Yeah.
Is there any other question? Yes, there's a lady here. Oh, you're being greedy, are you? Is there anybody else before her? There's a lady over there with her hand up.
Now.
पापा क्या कहते हैं?
I think my dad was always expected the unexpected from me, so he wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, he was well aware of the fact that I wanted to actually leave Bombay way before I made my first film. Sort of get off the mainstream or whatever. But he would, I think he would be supportive and appreciative of what I was doing. Yeah.
I think you would make sarcastic jokes about it.
He left you for that.
More questions? Let's have some new hands up. There's a gentleman over there. Question on Nasir Saab, please. Just shout out your question.
Yes.
Is the mic
going there?
Yeah.
Hi, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Aamir again.
Hi.
And my question is
Your
that...
question better be short this time.
Yeah, it's just one line. It's just simple that for the writer also, it's for Aamir and my writer, that in the race of life, like method and madness, which wins and which is more applicable while writing the book. You have written the book, so you have lived, some characters in that. So what's applicable for the youth to practice, method or madness?
It's for you and me. You go first. Method is for you, madness is for me.
I actually didn't get the question clearly.
मतलब क्या करना चाहिए? Should the youth follow method or should they follow madness?
I think it's best left if you.
My question is this.
Like question मैं समझ गया. मैं अभी answer देता हूँ. You have to have madness. I think no matter what field of profession or whatever path of life you've chosen, you need a certain amount of थोड़ी बहुत madness चाहिए, to really excel in what you're doing and to break new paths and you also need a method to be able to give it some structure. So you need a bit of both, I would imagine.
I would imagine that complete madness is a problem.
Yeah.
So you have to have a structure with it. Otherwise, it's like intelligence. It has to be applied. Anybody? Yes, there's a lady. Oh, are you stand up?
साहब ने उन्हें पुश किया था इसके लिए कि उसके बारे में आप थोड़ा प्रकाश डालेंगे.
Well, I to be very honest with you, I did think about this because I know that Rafi goes through his lean patch, from the 70s onwards. Once Kishore becomes the main star after Aradhana, but I couldn't put my finger to it and say that of course Rafi Saab has a big contribution, not just in Nasir Saab's films, in any film that he sang. He was a very famous playback singer, very very versatile. I'm as big a fan of his as you are. But I didn't explore this thing that, because this film is about Nasir Hussein's cinematic craft. It's not a biography, it's not about personal relationships that Mansoor had with Nasir Saab or Nusrat had with Nasir Saab. It looks at his cinematic craft. I would perhaps look at what you're asking on a book on Rafi. That's how I would look at it.
सर एक छोटी सी रिक्वेस्ट है नासिर साहब की लेगेसी को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए मंसूर साहब को काम करना चाहिए. Why is not working? One of the best directors जो है वो काम ही नहीं कर रहे हैं. ऐसा कैसे चलेगा? इतने दो अमेजिंग फिल्म आपने दी है जो.
Absolutely right.
आमिर सॉरी आपने छोड़ दिया फिल्म में.
I'll try.
Well, if I can just add something over.
Because he went to find out about Nasir Saab's lecture on cheese making. He was enriched after that.
No, we all like to think of this that we live in these narrow bubbles that I write on cinema and somebody else does something else, but
it's a book on economics.
Economics and the
global warming को avoid करना है.
But I want my son to come to the farm. But I just want to add a little thing about this method and madness. Because my dad had the method and I had the madness. And we learned how to bridge that gap, and Aamir and Nusrat were in crossfire in that. So, like in the beginning, I was trying to explore my space. And I was trying to find the hero. Because the heroine of Camels of Camel was very strongly defined by my dad. So it was written in, and the hum, and the this and the that, and everything. You know what Rashmi is all about. But we didn't know what the hero was all about. But of course, in my mind, I knew Aamir is going to be there, and I was also both through Aamir's personality and also what I thought Raj should be. So जब हम लोग beginning का introduction scene discuss करते थे, and I used to of course go into this fantasy. But I want to go through, I want to explore ruins, and I want to track animals, and I want to, so the opening scene, he says, what is the scene for the hero? So I said, this, the two friends are walking through and they say, Raj kahan chala gaya? Pata nahi yaar kahan dikh nahi raha hai, jungle mein gaye. And I said, there's a tracking shot over the trees of the two friends talking and walking, and then you realize that the hero is actually tracking them on the trees. So my dad said, अच्छा, तो मतलब हमारा hero जो है वो बंदर है. So this is how to pull me out of my madness.
There was another scene that you did. So the other opening scene I remember for Raj that you did was, which again Jean bounced, was Kamra hai, he's sitting in his room and he's working on the table lamp. Raat ka time hai, he's working on something, and suddenly you see this snake emerges from behind the sofa, and it starts moving slowly towards. You remember this? It starts, yeah, you wrote this. It slowly starts moving towards the character of Raj, and Raj he's totally unaware कि एक snake है जो मेरे तरफ आ रहा है. And the snake comes, climbs up on the chair that he's sitting on, and it comes right over here next to him. And when it comes right over here, Raj, जो भी वो कुछ कर रहा है, कुछ draw कर रहा है, and all that, and he pats the snake and he continues doing what he's doing. Then you realize that it's his pet snake, and he's a person who loves animals, and he's got a special bond with animals. So which is why when they're lost in the jungle, he also thought of things. Okay, Rashmi's character is freaking out, but this guy, he knows animals, so he, but then that also got bounced for some reason.
But I think it's very interesting because you talk about method and madness, and we
try and keep away from her. Otherwise, she comes to know too much about us.
Speaking about
method
and madness.
Now, shall we have one last question?
Last.
If there are other books that you've read, did you find them interesting? Did you find them existing as parallel dimension? Yeah.
Film books.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I've not read this one yet. I've given interviews for it and all that, but since the time has been ready, Akshay has been wanting me to read it. But I've been busy in Dangal, so I didn't get the opportunity, but I will. But as far as film books goes, I just love them. I love reading film books. I've read a book on Nargis Ji, I've read a book on Meena Kumari, I've read a book on Guru Dutt, I think you wrote that. So I just drink it up. I love reading with that whole world I want to be in at all times. So I've read, I read a lot of books on films, including about personalities who are not necessarily Indian. Like one of my favorite books is the autobiography that Frank Capra wrote, The Name Above the Title. What a fantastic book. And there's a biography on Billy Wilder पे एक biography है, वो भी superb है. मतलब I've read thousands of books on, not thousands of other, but I've read a lot of books on film personalities, and I really love that. So I'm especially thankful to Akshay that him and other writers like him are taking the trouble to take us into that world, which we can experience. And I understand that sometimes you have to keep an allowance कि यार उस इंसान की जिंदगी में actually क्या हुआ था, शायद थोड़ा यहाँ left right होगा, but it's more or less in that space. So I'm not so much interested in 100% true account, because I know that's not possible. But it still takes me into that world, and I love that world. So I get lost in that world. I just love reading books on film personalities.
Rusat, what do you think? The answer.
Was that for me?
Yes.
What is your opinion on this? You like reading film books on one film personality?
I haven't read as many as Aamir has, and I've read the one on Wahida Ji. I really enjoyed that tremendously. I've read Kurosawa's. So yeah, I've read a few and I enjoy them tremendously. As to this one, I've read this in a much earlier draft. Yes, and of course it is for everyone to read it and enjoy the world that he has taken such a lot of time and effort to bring it together for us. And I'm really grateful because see, I was thinking about it this morning that so many people are quite familiar with my father's work in a slightly separate way. I mean, we mention a film and say, oh yes, of course, or you mention a song, people know about it. But it's been quite a special pleasure for me to see his work being
Broken down.
yes
Analyzed
in a serious way, and I thank Akshay for that. I thank you.
Collins, is still there? Okay, great. And I think I want to thank everybody. First of all, Mami, for hosting this evening, for celebrating a wonderful classic, and thank everyone at the panel.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everybody, and good night.
क्या करूँ इतनी मेहनत करी कर लेते कार्ड P2 है लेके आए हो लगा